podcast jungle with a mic to machete. Aldreama Harper, she ready and steady. Organizedpreneur with a plan, never petty. Dropping gems, got my thoughts feeling heavy. Podcast Launchpad where the dreams take flight.
Welcome to the OrganizedPreneur Podcast Launchpad. I'm thrilled that you're joining me today as we unlock secrets to launching a podcast that resonates with your audience and amplifies your message. We help you turn your calling into content that changes lives. I'm your host, Aldreama Harper, and today we're diving into a God-inspired framework that will transform your podcast dream into reality. Proverbs 16, verse 3 tells us, "Commit your work unto the Lord, and your plans will be established." Let's apply this wisdom to our first pillar in the 5 C's of podcasting. So, you're dreaming of sharing your voice with the world. Amazing. Podcasting is incredible. I'm here to guide you every step of the way. And so we're going to be exploring the 5 pillars of podcast power, a proven framework to build your show from concept to launch. So let's go ahead and get started with pillar 1. Clarify your podcast niche. This is your foundation. You want to make sure that you clarify your niche by asking yourself the question, what message do you bring to the table? What burning questions keep your listener, your ideal listener, awake at night? Think of Proverbs 29:18, where it says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Without a clear vision, without a clear niche, without clarity in you thinking about your podcast in terms of what you offer, your podcast risks getting lost in the noise. So you want to define your purpose, your audience, and the transformation that you offer. Did you know that there were over 4.7 million podcasts globally? But only 40% remain active. I just checked those statistics recently. And your niche isn't just a topic, it is a ministry. This is your ministry. And so you really want to be intentional and serious about asking yourself these questions. What unique perspective has God given you? What audience needs your message the most? What problems can you solve through your content? And by the way, there's a difference between your audience and your niche, okay? Your niche is about the content, and your audience is about who is listening. So that is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, craft compelling content. I gotta just say this, and I know you've heard this over and over again. Content is king, or in this case, it's queen, because I'm talking to you all queens, right? But ask yourself, what stories, insights, and expertise will captivate your listeners? Think about it. Think about that. Think about the stories and the unique perspective that you bring. Think about Jesus's parables, simple stories that conveyed profound truths. Why? Because he was intentional in his teaching. There were those who were open to receiving and those who were resistant. So parables were essentially used for separating those who were truly seeking understanding from those who were not. And so your content should educate, entertain, and empower. So a recent study showed that 65% of podcast listeners tune in for educational value. And just like Jesus taught through parables, your content should engage your audience with stories, provide actionable value, and stay consistent with your message. So studies show that podcasts with consistent themes retain 80% more listeners. That's a high percentage. And keep in mind that your content is not for everyone. And so you want to be intentional about that. Okay. Let's move on to pillar number 3. Cultivate a loyal audience. Cultivate a loyal audience. So building a community around your podcast is essential. Your support system, think of it as your tribe. And just as the early church gathered together, you want to create a space where your listeners can feel connected and a place where you engage with them on either social media, respond to them in comments, actually build genuine relationships around a community. Proverbs 27:17, it says, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. So building community is biblical. And so consider these statistics. 80% of podcast listeners complete entire episodes. 61% of listeners purchase products mentioned by their favorite hosts. So why not, right? Why not create community? But you can create connection through prayer for your audience, engagement on social media, and responding to feedback. And there are ways you can do that on most of the platforms that I'm familiar with, but particularly on Spotify. If you're hosting your podcast on Spotify, you can respond back and engage with your audience by asking for feedback, right? So that is pillar number 3, creating community. Pillar number 4, create your podcast haven. This is probably one of the most um, frequent questions that I get around podcasting. In fact, it is the first question that I get asked because everybody wants to start there. They want to know, how do I create my studio? What equipment, should I have? What kind of mic do I need? Now, I normally will say create your podcast studio, but I like to call it a haven because I don't want the word studio to intimidate you. This can be as simple as creating a corner, a little space in your home where you have a decent microphone. You can have a microphone like this. This was actually a very expensive microphone, less than $30 that I recently purchased. And not only that, I am in the corner of a room. Okay. It looks like a studio, and it is my studio, and it is my home office, but it is also a little corner. And it really doesn't take much to create that podcast haven, right? But the key is to create a space where you can focus and deliver your message clearly. And it doesn't require you breaking the bank. In fact, a small investment of quality equipment, like I just shared with you, can make a big difference in terms of a professional sound in your podcast. And so, which brings me to a scripture, 1 Corinthians 14:40. It says, let all things be done decently and in order. And so, just as Solomon prepared the temple with excellence, prepare your recording space the same way. Invest in quality of equipment, but you don't have to break the bank. Just like I just shared with you, I have a dedicated space. Test and optimize your setup. Here's the fact for you. 94% of listeners consume podcasts while doing other activities. So guess what? Your audio quality is crucial. People will tune out if there are glitches, if it's hard um, to distinguish and hear your audio in your podcast. If you're doing video podcasts and someone is actually watching you, and the sound, your lips are moving, and the video, they're out of sync, they're gonna tune out, because now you're having your audience to work too hard to figure out what it is you're saying. They don't want to do that work. Nobody does, right? So your audio quality is crucial in terms of your professional sounding podcast, and creating a space where you have good quality sound, and you're doing the things that creates a great experience for your listeners. Okay, so let's move on to the final pillar. Pillar number 5, commence with your podcast. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you can actually launch with confidence, knowing that you've laid a solid foundation. Remember, even the smallest step forward is progress. It should never be that you are trying to attain perfection, because it doesn't exist. Instead, strive for excellence. As Galatians 6, verse 9 reminds us, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Here's another scripture, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. It says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I know that there are a lot of people out there that I've talked to actually, that they're afraid to get started. They're afraid that it's not going to be perfect. They have to make sure that everything is perfect before they get started. It doesn't work that way. You gotta get started. Here are a couple of statistics for you. Most podcasts never make it past episode number 7. As a matter of fact, I've seen statistics that show that they don't make it past episode number 3. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. My first podcast, which was back in 2013, it only has 12 episodes, because these 5 pillars that I'm sharing with you right now was not a part of my process at all. I was all over the place, struggling to get listeners. I don't even know if I knew that was, I didn't even know how to do it. And so, but when you are launching a podcast, typically 3 to 5 episodes you should have ready. I didn't know that. I keep saying that, but I really didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. Have those episodes ready, right? 48% of podcast listeners discover shows through word of mouth. That's very powerful. Word of mouth. So just start, right? Create those 3 to 5 episodes. These 5 pillars that I've shared with you are absolutely essential. It's going to take some time to start building up your momentum. But remember Noah, when he built the ark before the rain came, and he had never even seen rain? But he prepared well. He prepared well, and he trusted God with the results. That's all I'm saying to you. And so here's a recap of those 5 pillars. Number 1, clarify your podcast niche. Number 2, craft compelling content. Number 3, cultivate a loyal audience. Number 4, create your podcast haven. And number 5, commence with your podcast. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And if you are ready to start your podcasting journey, there will be a link where you can grab a checklist and guide that will give you every step of the process. And so go and grab that, and don't forget to subscribe to the OrganizedPreneur Podcast Launchpad. And so join me next week as we dive deeper into more topics on business, podcasting, productivity, and motivation. Remember, your voice matters, your message matters. And with God's guidance, you can impact lives through podcasting. Until next time, this is Aldreama signing off. Be blessed.